All right. Lavade, alone or besides. Then mishpacha is family or clan. Milchama, war or battle. Now notice how most of these words that we're looking at have three consonants. Sometimes things happen. We have the geminate words where the last two consonants are twins, and so the second one can drop out. Stuff happening like that. Feminine words like barakah, we have a feminine ending there, so that ending is there, but the basic root of that is beit, resh, kaf, right? So you can see that. So most of the words that we have end up consisting of three consonants. Now, if you get something that varies from that, like the word for Pharaoh has four, right? Well, obviously that's not a word that originates in Hebrew. It originates in Egyptian, right? Or whatever, Coptic or whatever it is. So words that come into Hebrew from other languages don't necessarily follow that pattern, right? Well, here we have some pretty long words. Now, they have feminine endings on them, obviously. But we have some pretty long words for family and war. These are from Hebrew, though. What's going on here? Well, obviously we have a feminine ending there, but why do they begin with a main? What we're taking is the three words for family, the word for family, the three root letters we have are Shin, Pei, and Chet, right there. Now, that's actually a verb that means to pour out. Now, in some forms, you can make a participle out of a noun, and when you do that, you add a main to the front of the verb to make it a participle. And participles are verbs moving in the direction of nouns, right? So if you can make a noun form out of a verb by kind of going that route, right? And so this word to pour out, I'm not really exactly sure where that, how that connects with family, but it might be that if you carry water and come home with it, you're going to pour it out for the family. I don't know whether that has any connection. Probably a cultural thing that we can't relate to in some sense. But that's kind of the track that seems to have taken. It's got a feminine ending, but it really does have at its root those three consonants, and I think that main is there because it forms a noun, kind of like a verb would form a participle. And the same is true with milchama. You have lacham being a verb in the middle of that, presumably having to do with fighting. So that's where we get a little bit longer word happening there. But it's still based on that principle of three consonants that we're used to seeing. All right. Saviv. Here we have three consonants again. Don't confuse that. That's a vowel at that point, isn't it? Saviv means all around, surrounding, neighborhood. People. That's almost used 2,000 times. And eight. Tree, and the plural is 18. Interesting. Any questions on these two chapters then? You just have to spend some time. That's all. Spend some time. Are you going to come out of it next week? Are you going to come in an expert? No. But, you got to know the vocabulary, right? And when you look at chapter 8, there's really remarkably little that you really have to know, right? So, mixed in with the vocabulary, or not mixed in, but in a vocabulary kind of way, on a quiz, I could give you any of these forms in those two columns on the top of page 71, right? And you could say what they mean, right? And then I could ask you to write out on page 81 the type 1 suffixes, singular, plural, and all of those persons and genders and all of that, right? So in terms of endings, that's not as bad as it's going to get, let me tell you. But being able to apply them in all these ways, if you get a little bit familiar with that in the chapter, then it'll go. As much as the other stuff is becoming second nature to you, do you feel some of that stuff becoming second nature to you? That was completely and totally foreign when we started? Throw me a bone here.
All of it. First 5 chapters.
Any of it? I mean, are you still really uncomfortable reading from right to left? Still having a hard time recognizing the alphabet? Maybe a little bit, but I mean, it's just getting there, right? So with time, this stuff is surprisingly going to get there. You're going to see these pronominal suffixes, and honestly, again, you're going to see the first common singular and the third masculine singular far more probably than the rest of them put together, just about. And that's what you see in the text. And you're going to look at that, and it's not even going to throw you for a loop. You're just going to know what that is. Bam, bam. It's just going to be all right. Well, it has to be that the grammar is difficult, so when you get to the Bible, it seems easy. That's the way it ought to be, right? Okay, it's 8 o'clock. We want to start again at 8:15. And we can get to some fun stuff then. It's artful and truncated and those sorts of things. So, you get into sections of narrative, and that'll probably be your easiest stuff. You get into the more non-straightforward stuff, and that's going to be probably more difficult. And another thing is that, the vocabulary, when you get into things like the prophets and the poets, the poetry, that kind of a thing, your vocabulary starts becoming a challenge.
How difficult is Job?
I probably would say, some narrative and a lot of poetry, but I would probably say Job is probably moderate-ish, I suppose. Maybe not that hard. Job is probably the first book of the Old Testament written.
That's kind of why I was asking to see if it was easier because of its...
Well, yeah, you're talking about quite a time span, writing there. Yeah. Okay. All right, thanks, Carl. Let's take our Bibles and turn back to Genesis, only let's jump ahead just a little bit. In honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. How about that? Today, probably not for those that are going to be watching the tape, but for us today, this is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, isn't it? Since it's a Monday. I saw a picture on television that was kind of disturbing. They've been having things related to Martin Luther King Day on television today, and I saw a black and white picture of an African American. I guess back then they would call him Negro, man walking, and he had a sign on his chest, and the sign simply said, "I am a man." And it's kind of disturbing that a person has to have a sign on them to indicate that. I suppose probably the thing that Martin Luther King Jr. is most famous for would be his views on racial issues and discrimination and those sorts of things. He was a pastor. So in light of that, I think it would be interesting for us to read a couple of verses in Genesis 1, particularly verses 26 and 27. Because at the heart of the issue is this issue of human beings made in the image of God. And that gentleman who had the sign on that said, "I am a man." The point being, I am a man just like anybody else, any other human being, white or whatever color. That man may well have had a sign that said, "I am also the image of God." And so the idea of human beings the idea of human beings being created in God's image really is the biblical and theological foundation that the idea of non-discriminating, those sorts of things, stands on. For me, and I suppose for Martin Luther King as a pastor. So Genesis 1:26. Let's see if we can make some sense of this in the original text. Let's try to pronounce it first of all. 1:26. We're on page 2. We made it to page 2.
1,324 to go.
Yeah. Yeah, some of you have wisely made photocopies to get the print bigger. I think that's a good idea. Yeah. You see that all the time, don't you? Viomer. Well, you want to keep going?
Keep going or stop?
Yeah, keep going.
The slant line is just, that's not part of it, right? Just
No, that's an accent.
Aisha.
Close. Naaseh.
Naaseh.
That's a scene, right? Mm-hmm. Batsal Menu.
Menu?
Menu.
How do you get menu out of the end? My print's cut off.
Your print's cut off. Well, you got you have the big Bible? Or no, you
okay, now I can read it.
Yeah, okay. No, you don't have the big Bible. Okay.
The left side of this is kind of cut off.
Batsal Menu. Pardon me? The Savas silent is Alamid because the Tatak that comes before it is short. All right. Anybody else want to try to go on from there? Next line.
I'll do it.
Okay. Kidmutenu, yeah. Vayiradu. Mm-hmm. Vayirdu, basically, really. Vayirdu. Bidgot. Mm-hmm.
What's that under the
Accent.
Oh, okay.
The vowel for the iron is that whole involved.
So that's just Uba then?
Hmm?
Uba O?
Yep.
Okay. Hashemayim.
Okay.
Call. What's over the all third?
Accent.
Rex.
Aretz, yeah, because remember the accents on the alpha there, in the alpha aleph. If you see a mark and it doesn't look like a vowel point, it's probably an accent.
Okay.
All right, somebody else want to carry on?
He was got
A blue cow. Hair. Mish. Blue cow hair mish.
Now, uva kol. Why is it kol?
Oh, it's come on, it's comments.
Kametz ketuf, and we just had that up there too. That should be uva kol as well. Kametz ketuf because it's in a closed unaccented syllable.
And then
Uva kol harimish.
we call Arabic. Baromeus.
Haramesh.
Baromeus. Al-Haritz.
All haaretz.
Al-Haritz.
Okay, very good. All right, Vayomer, and he said. You see that over and over and over, right? Especially in narrative. And he said, and he said, and he said. But there is a subject supplied here. What's the subject? Elohim. So, and God said, and now it's interesting here because we have first common plural forms happening here in this verb. This is the first common plural. And God said, let us make Adam, man. Let us make man. Now, Batsal Menu. Now we've learned all of this stuff here. We need to know Salam. Salam means image. All right? That's the vocabulary form. Now, what's the rest of it? Okay, so the bait is the prepositional prefix. Bait means in. Okay, and salmenu. That's right. Nu is again a first common plural ending. So, in our image. Now it's kind of interesting. Does that prove the Trinity? Well, no. And you could say, Elohim is plural, so it's influencing these other things. Although that doesn't happen usually. Boy, I sure think there is something consistent with the Trinity here. However, reading back, right? And God said, "Let us make man in our image." Kidmutenu. Here we have a similar thing. We have the kaf, according to, and then we have the enu, according to our likeness. See how that's working? So now we have stuff stuck onto the front of the word, stuff stuck onto the back of the word, but we can deal with that, right? You can see it. And God...
What's the root word?
The root word would be damut. All right. So, and God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness." All right. And let him rule. Now, here's a bait, but in English we would say, let him rule over. Dog is the word for fish. Let him rule over the fish of, plural construct, Hayam. What? What's that mean, Hayam? The fish of the sea. Yam is sea.
think it's David.
Right? Shemayim is heaven. Hamayim is water. Yam is sea. So let them rule over the fish of the sea. Yeah, and that's plural too. So let them rule over the fish of the sea. Now, what do you think that is on that next word? Vav, that's right. That's a conjunction, vav, right? And then the bait is preposition. Now, notice we're having baits on the front of these because that's consistent with what that verb rule. In English, we've got rule over. That's a preposition, isn't it? Well, in Hebrew, they're going to want rule bait, right? So, in our English, we're going to call it rule over. But in Hebrew, the preposition they're wanting, idiomatically, is bait, for whatever reason. It's their language. They can do with it what they want. All right? And oaf, and over the birds of Hashemayim, the heavens, the sky. Now, behema, vocabulary word. We just had. Behema, right. Cattle, the beast, right. The four-footed animals. You might give it a King James kind of idea there, right. The four-footed animals, but the beast. So, and then we have the bait, and then we have our behema word, right. And the beast, and bakol, what? And over all haaretz, the earth, okay, or the land. All right, let them rule over the beast and over the beast, the cattle, and all the land or earth. And here we have bakol again, and over all Remesh, Romesh. Now, do you notice that those are from the same root? Okay, so the Remesh, a Remesh is a creeping thing, right? And Remesh is definite, the creeping thing. So over every creeping thing, and then Romesh is going to be a participle. Romesh is going to be a participle with a definite article on it. So if Remesh is a noun meaning creeping thing, what do you think Ramash as a verb is going to mean? To creep. So here we have the creeping things creeping, because that's what creeping things do, right? They creep. The creeping things creeping, and you can see this is a little bit poetic, isn't it? Creeping all. What does all mean? On or upon. So creeping things on haaretz, on the earth. Right. So let us make man in our image and let them rule. So it seems, first of all, right from the start, God is planning to make man in his own image, to make man so that man rules, and let them rule to make more than one of them. Right? So you can see that what God is planning right off the bat. This idea of God making man in his image is critically important, isn't it? Because that is the root of our value as human beings. As human beings, we are the image and likeness of God. Now, you could have long theological discussions about what it means to be the image and likeness of God. Whether or not that, a tripartite view of humanity, spirit, soul, and body corresponds to the Trinity. That's a bit shallow, but there are certain things about human beings, that fall in line with image of God. We talked about a little before. One of the things we're doing here, learning language. This kind of developed ability to communicate in language is part of being the image of God. And because we're image of God, we can communicate with God. Our value as human beings is deeply rooted, or rooted entirely, really, in the fact that we are image of God. Now, what happened at the fall? What happened to the image of God at the fall? You could also have long theological discussions about what happened to the image of God at the fall.
Nothing.
Well, something.
God or man didn't fall, but God didn't change.
Well, God didn't change, but what happened to humanity as image of God at the fall? See, some would argue that man is no longer the image of God anymore. Well, later God talks about killing the later. Just a few chapters later, God's talking about killing is wrong because you're killing the image of God. That's after the fall. James, that's right. James also, talks about the fact that we are still image of God. So clearly, the image of God maybe is marred or changed in some negative way at the fall. Sinful nature comes in and those sorts of things. But the image of God is not lost. And so we are all, every human being is the image of God. Sometimes people talk about the love of God and they say, well, I don't know why God loves me, but He does. And I think if that's where you're at, as long as you know God loves you, that's awesome. But I believe I know why God loves me. Why does God love me? That agape love. For God so loved the world, every person in the world. Why does God love me? He loves me not for anything I have done and not anything I bring to the table, but God loves me because I am His image. God made me His image. How could God not love His image? See? The book of Ecclesiastes in chapter 3 says that God made man so that he would yearn for a connection to the infinite, yet would not be able to see the end from the beginning. In other words, God made human beings to have a yearning for that which is infinite, and yet we are finite. So we are, by definition, limited, but we need a connection with that which is not limited. And so, by ourselves, then, we are, by definition, dissatisfied. Right? Because we are limited people in a limited world, yearning for the unlimited, and we can't create the unlimited. We can create a lot of stuff, but we can't create the unlimited. No matter how much money we make, no matter how many toys we buy, no matter how big our house is, it still isn't infinite. Pascal talked about the God-shaped vacuum in every person. The only connection we have with that which is infinite is our connection with God. See? And that's why we can be finite beings with an infinite value. Why do I have an infinite value as a finite being? Because I am the image of God. And God values me infinitely. Was the sacrifice of Christ infinite? Infinite God took on the sins of the world. How am I worthy of the infinite sacrifice of Christ? Because I am the image of God. Careful. Am I deserving of the sacrifice of Christ? No. Am I worthy of the sacrifice of Christ? Yes. Because I am the image of God. Now, did I do anything to get to be the image of God? No. Can I do anything to stop being the image of God? No. I cannot. So am I worthy of the love of God? In other words, is it a right thing? Is it a righteous thing for God to love me? As the image of God, I am worthy of the love of God. Remember, I didn't make myself God's image. I can't stop being God's image. It has nothing to do with my choices or my abilities. It has everything to do with God's choices and God's abilities. And because of that, I am worthy of the love of God. Now, I'm using words in a particular way for this discussion. You'll understand that. Am I deserving of the love of God? No, because my choices have made me undeserving of God's love. But do my choices keep me from being the image of God? Now, my choices can keep me from living up to what it means to be the image of God. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Right? So, I'm worthy of the love of God. Not deserving of it. And every human being is. Anybody more worthy than me? No. Anybody less worthy than me? Asian, Indian, black, Hispanic, white. Any of those races not the image of God? Any of those races unworthy of the love of God? No. See? So, the idea of the image of God is utterly foundational. I mean, in this verse, there is so much of Bible and theology in this verse in seed form that it's just astonishing, isn't it? You understand the concept maybe of progressive revelation, right? Where as God reveals more over time, He reveals more of Himself and develops His plan, and we know more and more. So now, after Christ in the New Testament, we have a pretty developed understanding of God and what He's doing and all of these things, right? But here, what we have is a huge seed that's going to sprout in the Bible and develop in incredible, amazing ways. But this is the whole center of a healthy self-esteem, isn't it? And it's so important to get that balance. That I, as the image of God, have infinite value. But that's not speaking to what I deserve. Because, as the image of God, I have stuck my finger in the eye of God, and worse, I deserve infinite punishment. How is it that a person can go to hell forever for their finite sin? Because they were the image of God. They are the image of God with infinite value. And they turn their back on it. And they turn their back on God. They turn their back on the infinite love of God. Right? So you see this. I mean, can't you just meditate for a while on the idea that we are limited, finite people, and yet we are made to need a connection with the infinite, and yet we struggle and struggle on the level of the finite to fulfill our ultimate need, which is infinite, and it can only be fulfilled really in one place. And all of that comes back to the idea, the fact that God made human beings in His image. That's why we rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and the cattle and all of the earth and those creepy things. And that's why we get to eat them, by the way.
That'd be why we're worthy of His love. Therefore, we deserve His punishment.
That's right.
The syllogism there somewhere. We're worthy of His love. Love
if he loves us, he'll punish us, therefore we deserve what? Something I'm missing in there, but that would seem to...
Well, that's absolutely right, and that's very profound. It is actually the very love of God for humanity that necessitates hell. Because what is love? Love, I think you can define agape love in this way, affirming infinite value. If God did not value a human being infinitely, then his actions wouldn't matter infinitely. But they do. If God didn't care...
Is it so much because, maybe this is getting too much theology, is that because so much that man has infinite value, or because the offense is against the infinite? And therefore the offense itself, in one sense, becomes infinite.
Well, the offense is against the infinite. The offense is against God's infinite, the infinite value God places on us. But God can only place infinite value on us because we are His image. God never puts infinite value on a bird. God never puts infinite value on a tree. God never puts infinite value on any created thing but a human being. Incidentally, 1 John, that's why we should never put infinite value on created things other than a human being. Do not love the world. Stop loving the world or the things in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the boastful pride of life. So, yeah, that's all connected. It's a fascinating thought, from this verse. Flows so much. It's a fascinating thought. As the image, really, speaking of law, in a theistic society, whether people know it or not, it seems to me that the very foundation of law is that people are in the image of God. Why worry about murder? Because you have the image of God thing. Why worry about stealing? Comes back to image of God thing. Can't steal from a cow, right? But you can steal a bell off a cow, and that's stealing. Why? Because somebody owns the cow and the bell. A person does. Right? So, that the whole image of God thing is just foundational to so much. And so, how should people be treated? Ultimately, as image of God, whatever race they are. See. But it even goes beyond race. When we look at verse 27, we'd like to try pronouncing some of verse 27. Okay. Okay. Bet Salmo, yeah.
Beislam, Elohim, Bara, Sato, Nakar,
Unakeva.
Or Unakeva. Bara. All
right, very good. All right, now, what is this? Vayiv Ra. All right, now, this is a different verbal form, but turn back over to Genesis 1:1. All right. Is this word going to ring a bell with the second word of Genesis 1:1? Bara. Okay, that's a perfect tense verb. Okay, we have an imperfect tense verb here, but with a reversing vav, so it makes it past tense, right? And he created. Now here comes the subject second, Elohim. So, and God created what is et? Okay, the definite direct object marker, Ha-Adam, and God created the man, Bitsalmo. Now, remember, Salam, if you look up at verse 26 at the end of the first line, what do we have? Bitsalmenu, right? Now, the menu part makes it plural, our image. Now, look, we've switched, right? Again, and God created, that's singular, right? Vayir bara is going to be a third masculine singular. So now we got a singular verb as normal with Elohim. So these plurals up here are not typical, right? So God created the man, Ba-Salmo. What does that mean? In his image. So the bait is that preposition we learned about. Salam is image. And O is that prepositional suffix. Right? The pronominal suffix. We just learned about that in chapter 9 today. Right? So O is what? What form is that? Third masculine singular. His image. Remember I told you you're going to see that one? Lots and lots? Right? And there it is. So, and God created the man in his image. All right. Batselem in, that's in image, right? Again, in the image. It's, see, we're being poetic here a little bit. It's narrative or prose, but it's poetic prose, right? In the image Elohim of God, bara. Now I'm back to the same form I had in Genesis 1:1. He created O-to. What's going on there? Okay, I know the O is the pronominal suffix, right? Same third masculine singular that we've been seeing. But what is the ot?
Plural.
Careful. Nope. Just had that in chapter 9. So you don't. I taught this to you. You don't remember? What's up with that? Huh? Him. Okay, explain it. It does mean him. Explain it. That's all right. Anybody can? It is him. Why is it him? Give up a phone number. Come on. Why is it him? It's the definite direct object marker with a pronominal suffix. That's it, right there. Right, and that's how you do pronouns in the objective case, because here this is the direct object. He created him. So now you have to have an object form of it, which means I use the definite direct object with a pronominal suffix, and that's exactly what this is here. Right, you can probably find the form of it, Jeff, right there on that page. You see that exact form right there? Yep. All right. Good.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out why it was.
Well, if it were the preposition, then it would have a heric always, right? But here it doesn't have a heric, so it's going to be the definite direct object marker. Okay. So, in his image, he created him. Now, here we go. Zakar u nakena, or nakeva. Male and female, he created Tom. Them. Now, remember, I have a tom, I have an ending here, right? Which is, we're going to know is going to be typical. So with the name here, it's going to be masculine. The masculine form is generic a lot of times, and here it definitely is, because it says very clearly male and female, right? It doesn't get any clearer than that. He created them. So I have the definite direct object marker again with the third masculine plural ending. All right? See, isn't this cool? You didn't think this stuff was all real in the grammar, did you? See? But here it is in the text, right? The interesting thing about this verse is that it makes a real connection between image of God and maleness and femaleness. So you can talk about race. It doesn't matter what race you are. You're no more or less image of God than the next person. But when it comes to male and female, how does that relate to image of God? See? Well, is God male or female? Yes. Right? In a sense, neither. In a sense, both. Importantly, he usually presents himself in male terms, and there's a reason for that, which we won't go into lest we get ourselves into trouble. Right? However, the point here is, God does present himself in female terms too. Look at Lady Wisdom in the book of Proverbs. And
Is a feminine.
oh, there you go. Yeah, see the glory of God. And so there are certain issues which hopefully we'll remember to get into. So there are certain very wonderful words that present God in very feminine terms. They're very powerful. So God is neither and both, or however you want to look at it. But here, maleness and femaleness are connected to the image of God. And it seems to me very clear that you don't have a completeness in the image of God until you have both male and female. So, male by itself, now, as a person, still image of God. But you don't have a complete picture of the image of God in just the male. You don't have a complete picture of image of God in just the female. Now, that doesn't mean the female by herself or the male by himself are more or less image of God as people. I'm talking about the picture of the entire holistic picture of God's image requires both maleness and femaleness. So again, respecting races, yes. Respecting genders, absolutely. So, is a man a better picture of God's image than a woman? No. Is a woman a better picture of God's image than a man? No. They're just both part of the picture that God's image gives us. And of course, when you put the two together, then you have a whole picture of the image of God, which says a whole lot about issues that are hot and heavy today in terms of relationship between men and women. And what is the book that columnist Maureen Dowd wrote? Something about men being unnecessary again. That's coming up again. Let's see women build hospitals and see how far they get. Well, some of them could do pretty well, but overall, that's nonsense, isn't it? And the whole, men or women, either one of them being unnecessary. They're both necessary. And the issue of homosexuality too flows from this, doesn't it? So, two very important verses that really are worth looking at this in English or Hebrew, better Hebrew, right? And meditating on these. So pretty powerful verses. One of the greatest advantages of reading in the original language, in particular reading these two verses in Hebrew, is that it slows you down. If you read these in English, it'd be great. God created man. He let him rule over the fish of the sea and blah, blah, blah. Great verse. Isn't that awesome? You'd have to make yourself slow down and think about those, which is possible, right? You don't have to make yourself in Hebrew. You're going to go slow. Right? And now you're meditating. What does this mean? And it just seems to put you in the right frame of mind for reading this thing. So I think that these are very powerful verses. I'm sad that our country spent so long, as Martin Luther King said, not living up to the ideals of our creed. Not living up to the concept that every person is the image of God. And you know how we pay for that today? We pay for that mistake by people who want to pervert the creed, saying, well, look, you got that wrong there. What's to say you don't have this wrong here? So now it opens the door for people to say everything about our creed or practice is wrong. See? And so we have people who want to put sexual preference on the same level as race or gender in terms of, discrimination. Right? If we'd got it right back there, they wouldn't have that argument. But we didn't. We didn't get it right. Hopefully we're getting it more right today with regard to race and gender issues.
Without having both man and woman eliminate God's image.
God's image would only be partial in humanity. You have to be very careful how you slice that, because the picture of God's image is only complete in the male and female. But any individual person is the image of God. And no one is more or less the image of God. So a person who never marries, they're not a second-class citizen. They're still as much the image of God as anybody else. But they have not, they have not participated in that union which completes the picture of God's image. You see. But I tell you what, I don't think a person could ever stop meditating on that or meditate on that enough. Why does God love me? Because I'm His image. I didn't do it. I can't change it. God's love is never going to change because of that. There's a good reason that God loves me. You don't have to know it, but I think it helps to know it. All right. What did we let off in the earlier verses of chapter 1? Let's start in verse 6. We'll work a little bit through that. Anybody who hasn't pronounced yet want to start pronouncing in verse 6?
Yomer, Elohim, Yehi,
Rakaya.
Batok, Amayim, Vahi,
Silent Shabbat. Yep.
Mayim,
All right, good. Anybody want to try to translate that?
I said it, you guys translate.
I'll help you. All right, and God said, Yehi. Now that's a form of that verb to be, Haya. All right, an imperative form. So God said, what would be? Let there be. Right. You've read this before in English. Let that help you. God said. God said, let there be Rakaya. That's the word firmament. What in the world's a firmament? Well, anyway, expanse, right? If you're a fan of the New American Standard. Okay, God said, let there be an expanse, batok. Okay, in the midst of, between, hamayim. All right, the waters. That's right. Vahi, and let there be. Excellent. Mavdil, division. Between, in English, between the waters, between waters to the waters, or between waters and water. Right? Let there be a division between the waters in English or something like that. Right? All right. See, now you're translating. How about that, huh? Pretty good, eh? All right. Who else wants to pronounce beginning in verse 7 then? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Vayavdeo, right? Uh-huh. Yeah, now that was one of our words tonight, right? Relative pronoun, right? Asher. All right. Uh-huh. Sure. Uvain. Mm-hmm. Right. Kia, yeah. Uh-huh. Cain, yes. All right, good. That was on the vocabulary quiz today. Cain, wasn't it? All right, good. See, Hebrew's relevant, isn't it? All right. Who wants to try some translating? Now, let me give you a clue here. Well, I don't know if it's a clue that's going to help you. But if you look at 126 on the next page over, the third word is a different form of the same vocabulary form as the first word of verse 7. And what was that? And God said, let us make. Okay, verse 7 then is. And God made. Very good. All right. So we're not going to worry about the different forms and what happened there, but that's the same vocabulary word. Okay. And God made. What's it? Okay. Direct object marker. Harakia. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's the firmament expanse word that we had in verse 6. And I pronounced that wrong because that accent. Sometimes when it has that accent with a Hirik, in my eyes it looks like a comets, but it's not. Rakia. I see it now. All right, so yeah, that's the expanse or firmament word. So God made the expanse, and then what? Now, up in verse 6, we had a mavdil, right? That was a noun form. Now we have vayavdeo. That's a verb form. See? Now, if up there it is a division, what do you think it is here? Okay, he divided, right? So, and God made the expanse and divided between the water, asher, relative pronoun, which, very good. The water which under the expanse. Okay, so we're going to have to add a verb of being in there. The water which was under the expanse. Uvain, and between the waters. which Ma'al, Me'al. No. Al is going to be on or upon. So Me'al is going to be above. We had under, now we have above. Between the waters which are above the expanse. Vayahi.
And it was so.
Yeah, and it was so. And it was thus. It was so. How about that then? You're translating Hebrew, huh? Pretty exciting, no? All right. One more verse before we go, because then we'll finish the paragraph. See that pay there with a nice paragraph marker? See that little pay sticking out in the middle of nowhere right there? Yeah. It's kind of like a break marker, you know. Yeah.
What are the colons?
The what?
Right before the A.
Okay, at the end of a sentence, that's equivalent to a paragraph. That's the strongest conjunctive accent. If you look on that little accent sheet of yours and look under the conjunctive accents, separating accents, it's the strongest, so it functions like a period. It's called a saluk sot pasuk. And so that little colon thing, along with that little line that sticks down under the new in Shani, those two things together are the saluk sot pasuk. And that's the forms. It really functions as a period in English, but it's an accent basically. Okay, remember the atnak we talked about, the caret that points up. That's the second strongest conjunctive accent. So that is telling you. Here, we call that sort of like a comma, kind of. It's not exactly a comma, but for all intents and purposes, right now, So that kind of tells you, in some sense, the middle of the sentence, typically. Kind of a thing, right? That's a great question. Okay, so who hasn't read pronounced tonight, and who wants to try to pronounce verse 8?
I'll try it.
Do it. Vayikra.
Yeah. Vayikra, Yikra, Elohim,
Larakia. Shemayim. Yep.
Erev.
Yeah, but where's the accent? You see the accent there?
Oh, that's what it's saying. Okay.
Boker.
Okay. Kind of like morning. Yom. And
Shani.
Or Shani.
All right. Who wants to give a shot at translating that? Kara. Now, remember, the three root letters are Kara, the Kof, Resh, Aleph. Now, we've had that in this context more than once, I think. Yeah. Kara means to call, right? So that's going to be a third masculine singular. It's a verb. The vavs are reversing vavs, so you have a perfect form with a reversing vav. So the yod gives you third masculine singular. Well, what's the subject of that going to be?
And God called.
Okay, and God called, right? Okay, and God called. La Rakia, what's that? The expanse. Now, it's very interesting here because what we didn't get is the definite direct object marker, right? Because we might think, in terms of English, we might think, oh, God called the expanse a direct object, right? But even in English and in Greek, the word called is different because it can take a double accusative, right? I called Bob a crook, right? And Bob and crook refer to the same thing, right? So I have an object complement there. You see what I mean? So I'm not getting a direct object marker here. I'm getting a lamed, which means to or toward. So idiomatically, you almost get the picture of calling to or toward something, right? That doesn't make good English. So we would say, and God called the expanse what? Shemayim, heaven, or heavens, right? But that's kind of interesting when you look at how, the Hebrew is working idiomatically there. And it's almost recognizing that the word called is different, for example, than the word he made. He made something. There's a direct object there. And you have one direct object. I mean, you could have he made this and this and this, but here he called, I can call Bob, but I can also call Bob a crook. And so those two things are two different words that refer to the same entity, right? The word teach is like that. If you ever hear somebody, be a smart aleck, what do you teach? I teach Hebrew. Well, I teach students. Well, la-di-da. I teach Hebrew and students because I teach students Hebrew. Double accusative again, double object again, but in this case, they don't refer to the same thing. For two different things. Teach students Hebrew, right? So the word teach takes two objects, but those two objects are not the same entity. The word call takes two objects, but those two objects are the same entity. See? Pretty interesting, huh? But you never thought English worked that way, did you? Right? So if somebody tries to be smart, you teach Hebrew, I teach students. You say, well, yeah, great pun on the double accusative. Okay, I teach students Hebrew, or something like that. All right, so who's translating? And God called the expanse heaven. Vayehi, it was Erev, evening. And it was morning. Yom Sheni. Day 2. Well, you may have a singular form of 2 here because you have one day, day 2, which is different than having 2 days.
Okay.
You see what I mean? Normally, it would, you'd have 2 days, but here we have day 2. The Jewish day begins in the evening, right? So it's consistent with this. I guess this came first. So Sabbath starts Friday at about 6 o'clock or something? Wow. All right. So here we're translating. Can you imagine this now? Huh? We haven't even had verbs yet, and y'all are translating. See, the grammar is harder than the Bible, isn't it? Right? But you can see how the grammar helps us. See all the stuff we had from the grammar? Huh? You thought this was just stuff on the page in here? That's useful stuff in this. All right. Any questions or comments before we go? Anybody tired? Huh? Yeah, there's a lot of preaching material there, isn't it? And frankly, that's one of I really want to show you, in some sense, the value of what you're doing. I know you're all motivated to learn Hebrew, but you need to keep that motivation pumped up, don't you? Right? And it's pretty awesome to be able to do that.